Very good morning to you. All of you have joined physically as well as online. Before, as usual, going to the routine thing, I will remind regarding the events, upcoming events, that tomorrow we will be having the capacity building program for the stroke management clinicians. The participants can come physically in the auditorium. Secondly, one of the main events, foundation sessions of the KSM, will be held on 6th of October. So we'll be definitely doing it according to the health guidelines. So I urge from all of you to participate in that as well. It will be held in Oakray. Today's speaker is Professor One Duminja Jayasinghe, who is the chair professor of oral medicine and periodontology and a specialist in oral surgery attached to the Department of Oral Medicine and Periodontology of the Faculty of Dental Sciences, University of Peradeniya. He's a graduate from Peradeniya with a BDS in 2001 and had his MS oral surgery from PJM Colombo in 2005. He's a fellow of the Faculty of Dental Surgery, Royal College of Surgeons and Physicians of Glasgow, and a fellow in Craniofacial Research Academy as well. He's a prolific researcher with more than 100 papers in international and local peer-reviewed journals, and awardee of the President's Award for Scientific Publication in the year 2014 and 15, NRC Merit Award in 2016, and also KSM Research Prize in 2020, and had more than 12 research grants to its credit. And also he has contributed in many ways to the University of Peradeniya Faculty of Dental Sciences as well as PJAM as a head of a department, and in many ways, and also the Faculty of Allied Health Sciences, and currently he functions as the Director of the Operational Technical Assistance, or OTS, the University of Peradeniya, which is part of the head operations as well. And more than that, he is the director of the Center for Research on Oral Cancer, which is his main area, oral cancer and OPMD. I mean, there are so many things. If we go on, he was the president of many associations, national associations in relation to dentistry, as well as National Authority on Tobacco and Alcohol. So with that, I would like to invite Professor Ruwan Jayasinghe to speak on common oral ulceration.
Thank you, sir, for those kind words of introduction. So today we are going to discuss some common oral ulcerations. Oral ulceration is a very important complaint encountered by medical as well as oral healthcare professionals. Not only among the specialists, even among the general practitioners, this is a very common complaint. And when we talk about the ulceration, we have to discuss the ulceration together with the erosion as well as atrophy, because these words go hand in hand, and the clinical presentation can be different from one time to the other. Oral ulceration is a debilitating condition. It hampers nutrition as well as it affects the quality of life. So that is why it is very important for us to know about the oral ulceration. Oral ulceration may be with a localized etiology, or it can be a manifestation of variety of systemic conditions or disorders. The oral ulceration may be reactive, it may be infective, it may be a benign condition, it may be a malignant condition, or it may be part of a systemic disease. So therefore, we cannot just ignore oral ulceration because it underlines there can be something serious. I have seen enough times where a simple oral ulceration, which has been seen by several people, to be something very important, and there are many instances where we have diagnosed important systemic conditions simply with the oral presentation. The management will depend on the correct diagnosis. There are many conditions giving rise to oral ulceration. So unless we are very careful, we will not be able to come up with the correct diagnosis. And if we don't have the correct diagnosis, our management will be an issue. The management with the clinical features alone can be a difficult situation at times because there can be similar clinical features. Classification is very complex and we have different types of classification. Different people are using different classification, and the classification may be depending on the clinical features, it may be depending on the histopathological features, it may be depending on the pathogenesis, or it can be due to some other classifications as well. Now I'm going to show you, don't worry about the crowded slide. This is just to show you the different types of conditions that we can get as oral ulceration. It may be local, it may be recurrent abscess ulcerations, it may be infections. There are different types of infections. It can be drug, systemic disease, miscellaneous conditions, as well as malignant. You can see some example. This is not the complete list. So we can see here, the basic thing here, there are so many conditions which can give rise to oral ulceration. But some of these are not common. So my the talk today will be basically highlighting the common oral ulceration, and I will talk a little bit on the rare ones as well because it is interesting. One of the commonest reason for us to get the oral ulceration is the viral infection. It may be herpes simplex, angina, or the hand, foot, and mouth disease. And in addition to that, there are some non-viral disorders like traumatic ulceration, recurrent abscess, malignancies, systemic diseases associated pathologies, as well as drug induced. Whatever it is very important to have a detailed history. Our differential diagnosis can be narrowed down into a great extent by having a differential diagnosis. In our history, there are three important points for us to consider. Number one, the length of the time. That will tell us whether the ulceration is acute or chronic. Number two, the past history of similar ulceration, which will tell us whether it is a primary ulceration or a recurrent ulceration. And thirdly, the number of lesions, which goes with the history and the examination, which will tell us whether it is a single or multiple. Because we are going to combine them together, and these three features are helping us to narrow down our differential diagnosis to a great extent. If the patient is having acute multiple lesions, the most likely it may be a viral infection, erythema multiforme, contact lesions, or ulcers due to chemotherapy. Recurrent ulceration may be due to recurrent abscess stomatitis, Behçet's, and herpes infection. Sorry. Then we have the chronic multiple lesions, which can be mostly associated with the systemic pathology. Chronic systemic ulcers may be due to trauma, malignancy, or even infection. This is basically giving us a differential diagnosis. We have the ulceration. We can divide them into three main parts: the acute ulcers, the chronic ulcers, and the recurrent ulcers. Acute ulcers can be single ulcer or multiple ulcers. The chronic ulcers, the same. We can have the single ulcers as well as multiple ulcers. Then we have the recurrent ulcers. So with these three features, we can, this is the algorithm that we can use very well to narrow down our differential diagnosis. So now we will take few of these ulcerations and we'll discuss the common ones. The acute single ulceration, the most common reason for one to get acute single ulceration is traumatic ulceration. Traumatic ulceration is quite common, and the trauma may be associated with physical reasons, thermal, or even the chemical irritation. Most of the time, the traumatic ulceration is due to a trauma, and we get traumatic ulceration is due to physical trauma, and mostly we get them in the tongue. Many of us are having experienced tongue biting accidentally when we are doing something, and all of a sudden we bite our tongue, and that is something very common. It is very common in men compared to the females. The ulceration may stay there for a few days, or even it can stay up to weeks. The ulceration will have borders which are slightly raised and reddish with the necrotic pseudomembrane. Most of the time, these traumatic ulcerations are painful, but at times you can have ulceration which are not painful as well. Now, these are two examples where we can see the ulceration, and sometimes these ulcers are nasty looking. But the diagnosis is not that difficult because these are acute ulceration. The patient will tell you the exact reason behind this. But you can have a chronic traumatic ulcerations as well. I will come to that later on. And the chronic traumatic ulcerations, the identification of the cause may not be that easy. We have to have a proper examination for to identify those. Now, this is the chemical burn. one of my patients whom I have seen only 3 weeks back. Now we can see how the ulceration was in, and this patient accidentally got some chemical into the mouth, and we can see the ulceration due to the chemical. The day 1, day 3, day 5, and the day 8, how the ulceration start healing, and by 2 weeks everything is gone. There's no evidence of ulceration at that point. Another reason for us to get acute ulceration is a necrotizing silometaplasia. Necrotizing silometaplasia is a disease that we get in association with the minor salivary glands. So therefore, it is very commonly seen in the palate, posterior palate, but at times we may see them in the lips as well as in the buccal mucosa. Why the people get necrotizing silometaplasia, still we don't know. The etiology is not very clear, but people believe it to be associated with ischemia or sometimes trauma giving rise to ischemia. This is very commonly seen after a local anesthetic injections, greater palatine block injection. If we give it very quickly, there can be pressure compressing the artery, so therefore there can be a necrosis. The necrotizing silometaplasia will heal gradually, but it may take weeks to have the heal. So therefore, when the patient is having this type of a necrosis, which takes some weeks to heal, it can mimic a malignancy clinically. And not only that, to get the things complicated, there can be pseudoepitheliomatous hyperplasia under the microscope, even microscopically. So therefore, it can mimic a cancer. The angina bullosa hemorrhagica, in simple terms, we call it as a blood blister. Again, we don't know exact reason to get this, and we believe it to be associated with trauma. So therefore, this is commonly seen in the posterior palate, especially among young females. It comes all of a sudden, and there will be a blood-filled blister, ruptures, leaving ulceration or erosion, and heals in few days' time. But times this can last for weeks, or it can recur again and again. Now the lower photographs are showing. These lower photographs are showing one patient. Again, we can see the day 1, the appearance in day 3, and the day 7, how it is improving gradually. But at the day 1, when we see the blood blister, we have to consider the other possibilities, the bleeding disorders, because at times the patient may be having that as well. Then we will move to the acute multiple ulcers. The commonest reason for one to get the acute multiple ulcers are the acute herpetic gingiostomatitis, which we very commonly seen among the children. So this is the HSV1 infection, and it's basically seen in the preschool children or the school-going children, and transmitted via the saliva. So therefore, it's very commonly seen in children who are attending the daycare centers or the Montessori's or the places which is crowded. There can be incubation period which will be few days or even a week, and then the patient will get the prodromal symptoms like the fever, malaise, body aches, followed by the ulceration in the oral cavity. Characteristically, these patients will have the lesions in the gingiva. The gingiva will be reddish, swollen, and there can be some ulcerations in the gingiva as well. So at times when we see this gingival inflammation and the involvement in the gingiva, we have to include the leukemia as one of the differential diagnoses, because these leukemic deposits can have the similar appearance. So this is one patient where we can see the multiple oral ulceration, and because of that, the patient is having the difficulty in eating and the pain. So therefore, the patient seeks the medication from us. But most of the time, these people, they don't come to us, because the patient start with the fever, and when the fever comes in, the patient will go and see a doctor or the pediatrician, and then they will start the treatment, and then with the treatment, it will gradually goes out, and the patient will identify the oral ulceration as part of the disease. So therefore, they will not take it seriously. The diagnosis is mostly comes with the clinical presentation, the typical clinical presentation with the gum involvement, but we can do some investigation to confirm the diagnosis as well. And these investigations are helpful, especially for the people who are having immunodeficiencies. In that case, the lesion can last for longer period. The management wise, we just manage the patient symptomatically. We don't need anything special, even though this is HSV infection. Acyclovir is not recommended unless the patient is immunocompromised. The lesion will heal in few days' time. Some of these patients can have the virus become latent in the nerve root ganglions, and later on the lesion can give rise to a recurrent attacks. Therefore, the patient will get the lesions in the lip, tiny blisters followed by the rupture, ulcerations in the lip, which we call as herpes labialis. And this can become recurrent, and sometimes the patient get multiple attacks, one after the other. In the hand, foot, and mouth, this is again something common, and compared to the HSV infection, the hand, foot, and mouth disease will have a decisional variation, and this may be due to the enterovirus or the Coxsackie virus A and B. Common among children. In addition to the oral ulceration, these people will have rash, especially in the hands and the legs. So here you can see some ulcerations in the oral cavity and the rash in the hand. Herpes zoster infection. The shingles can give rise to ulceration in the oral cavity as well as the vesicles in the face. The trigeminal nerve is not the commonest nerve to get involved in herpes zoster infection. Mostly you get them in the trunk, but at times we can get in the trigeminal nerve as well. So here what happens, the patient has the chickenpox and the virus get latent in the trigeminal ganglion and rarely in the facial nerve ganglion, and then it gets reactivated, especially in a stressful situation or in the immunodeficiency status, and the patient will get a unilateral rash. So here you can see some of the patients with the unilateral rash and ulcerations. So these ulcerations are very easy to identify because they are very much in one direction. It's always unilateral, and the ulceration will heal with scarring, and unfortunately most of these patients will end up with post-herpetic neuralgia, which is a very severe painful condition, difficult to manage unless we do the intervention at the correct time. So these patients definitely need acyclovir treatment to prevent them developing post-herpetic neuralgia. The management is very important in these patients. Then we will move to the erythema multiforme. The erythema multiforme can give rise to ulcerations. At times it may be a single ulcer, or at times it can be multiple ulcers. And here what happens, there's an inflammatory pathology going on because it is immune-mediated disease. The characteristic feature in erythema multiforme is vasculitis. So therefore, these people tend to develop bleeding, especially from the lips and also from the oral cavity. Erythema multiforme may be due to the drugs, or it may be due to the HSV infection. And there are theories going on this way and the other way. There are different types of classifications. Some people call it erythema multiforme only when it is due to the HSV, whereas if it is due to the drugs, the people will call it as the Stevens-Johnson syndrome, whereas some other people, they divide it according to the presentation of the disease. We can have involvement in the oral cavity as well as in the skin. And when it goes into the skin, we will see these characteristic Stargardt lesions or the bullseye appearance. And when we see this, it is pathognomonic, diagnosis is easy. Oral lesions will be present in about 30 to 60% of the patients, and most of the time it is present in the lip. As the name says, the erythema multiforme, the diagnosis is very difficult clinically because it has multiple forms. What we see in one patient is not what we are going to see in another. Most of the time the lips are involved, the lips are fully ulcerated, and there will be a lot of bleeding followed by the scab formation, and not only that, there will be this yellowish slough formation as well. And when we see the bleeding, that is very important because that is a feature which will help us in the diagnosis. So you can have erythema multiforme minor as well as the major. Minor is basically confined to the oral cavity, whereas the erythema multiforme major, you can see the involvement in the rest of the body as well. Now, like in this child, you can see the involvement in the hands and the legs. He has the lesion all over the body. So the photographs is showing the day one when I see the patient for the first time, and after a few days, you can see how the patient is developing the bleeding, and the bleeding stops and with the scab. The healing phase can be different from minor to major. Minor usually heals within a week, whereas the major, it may take few weeks to heal, and it is very common for them to have the recurrences. And the recurrences can happen at any time, but some people, they can progress and develop a severe forms like Stevens-Johnson syndrome or toxic epidermal necrolysis. So the correct intervention at the correct time is important to prevent they're developing into these diseases, especially if it is due to the drug, we have to be very careful. Those can develop into a Stevens-Johnson syndrome. We have to eliminate the etiological factors. The pain management is very important, but we have to be very careful. Most of the people develops the erythema multiforme either due to the antibiotics or due to the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. So if the patient is having you due to NSAID, and if you give the NSAID to control the pain, then basically we are worsening the condition. Antiviral therapy is important. Acyclovir 200 milligrams is important if the patient is not giving drug history. Hypersensitivity reactions are again very common. There can be, it may be a contact type of hypersensitivity reaction, or it may be a systemic hypersensitivity reaction, giving rise to the ulceration, the erosions in the oral cavity. Like this patient who has developed ulceration, the erythema, and this patient develops this due to a cosmetic. So the patient has applied a lipstick in the lips, and the patient developed a hypersensitivity reaction, and the hypersensitivity reaction was not only in the lips, but you can see it is involved in the rest of the mouth as well. Like I mentioned, there can be chronic ulceration due to the trauma. Now here you can see this patient in the right photograph, you can see the ulceration. And when you look at the ulceration, sometimes even we may see the induration, and they can mimic a malignancy. There are many times where the people has diagnosed this as a malignancy, whereas it is a traumatic ulceration, or it can happen in the other way around. The patient can have a malignancy, and when you look at it carefully, you may see a bad tooth, which is giving rise to the ulceration. And at times you can have malignancy. On top of that, you can have the trauma. So the diagnosis can get little complicated. And a case like this will not be very painful because it is a chronic inflammation that we are getting in. It is very important for us to take the course out and review the patient in 2 weeks' time to see the healing. And if the healing has not taken place in 2 weeks' time, then we have to exclude the malignancy by doing a biopsy. Another traumatic ulceration which can last for a long period of time is eosinophilic ulcer. Eosinophilic ulcers are commonly seen in the middle-age group, 40 to 60 years, and it is very common in the tongue. Around 60% of the lesions are present in the tongue. As it is lasting for longer period of time, it can mimic a squamous cell carcinoma. Eosinophilic ulcerations will give rise to pain time to time, but not all the time. The size can vary from half a centimeter to few centimeters in time. And interestingly, these lesions, when you do a biopsy to exclude the malignancy, healing process starts in. Lesion lasts for weeks and weeks without much of a healing. You do a biopsy, even though you have not included the entire ulcer, you take only part of it, the healing process starts and you will get the healing. Most of the time when you get the biopsy report, there is no lesion, everything has healed fully. Why it has happened, no one knows. Then we will move to the malignancy because this is something really important for us. We know the oral cancer is the #1 cancer among the Sri Lankan males. The numbers are going up, so therefore recognize the oral cancer at the early stage. Oral cancer, there are different types of oral cancers, but the squamous cell carcinoma is the most common type of oral cancer. Life disease, unless you diagnose it at the early stage, it will be very difficult to manage. But unfortunately, even though this is the #1 cancer in Sri Lankan males, it is a preventable. One, it is something tobacco and 95% of the people are getting it due to these habits. Number two, the lesion is present in a very easily visible area. Number three, most of the lesions are coming from a pre-lesion. You start with the precancer or a potentially malignant disorder, and then it goes into the cancer. So therefore, it is very easy to identify and prevent it till it's the #1 cancer among the Sri Lankan males. And if we diagnose the cancer at early stage, then we can do something and the survival rate will be very good. Stage 1 cancer, the 5-year survival rate is about 90%, whereas when it goes to the stage 4, the prognosis 5-year survival rates drop to 20%. It's very difficult for us to see a patient who is coming with the stage 1 disease. Most of our patients, about 60 to 70% of are coming with the stage 4 disease. Very unfortunate. And once it is stage 4, the things that we can do will be very limited. Early lesions, it is difficult to diagnose because they are very small, painless ulceration, and sometimes they look harmless. Therefore, the patients will not take it seriously, and they may just ignore it and wait and wait and wait. And not only that, even sometimes this is missed by the clinicians as well. But when the patient is having the advanced lesions, there can be some induration and it can affect the function, as well as there can be some pain. And in that case, the patient will come to get some treatment from us. So these are a few cases. The top ones are the very early lesions, the erythroplakia, and the chance of these to have some type of invasion is very high. But when you look at that, it's just a erosion, reddish patch, whereas the lower photograph, the right side one, you can see the lesion coming from a leukoplakia, white patch. The patient had the white patch. Still, you can see the white patch in the top. And below, the patient is developing the ulceration. And the other tongue photograph, again, a very small lesion. And unless we look at very carefully, even we may not recognize that there is a lesion in the tongue. So these are very early lesions, and if we are very lucky if we see it, and if the patient will be very lucky because we can do a lot on this. Then the patient will wait and the patient will come with some advanced disease. So these lesions are basically start growing in. And then it continues to grow, and you can see sometimes the lesion grows in, like in the lower photograph, you can see even the bone there, it has grown in, or sometimes it can start growing up. So there can be exophytic as well as endophytic lesions. And after a while, the lesion may come through the skin, and you may see the lesions in the face as well. So it can be extensive like this as well. Now, these patients are the people whom we see in the society. Even though these are advanced lesions, even though these are very visible lesions, still the patients are not coming to take the treatment. They just say like that. Again, some more cases of oral cancer, and you can see how the lesions have started growing up. At the same time, they are growing in. And not only a single lesion, at times you can see the multiple lesions due to the field cancerization. And the patient is having 2 lesions. I have seen patients with 3 lesions, 4 lesions. The independent lesion run from the other. It is not a direct spread of one lesion to the other. The oral cancer, at times not due to the squamous cell carcinoma. Like in these cases, these are not due to the squamous cell carcinoma. And you can see some lesions, they are coming from the salivary glands, minor salivary gland malignancies, and the lower photographs are due to a melanoma. The first photograph, you can see the lesions with the ulceration, whereas the second lesion is advanced lesion where we have a nodular growth. Second one, there is no ulceration as such, but in the first one, there is ulceration. So not all oral cancers are squamous cell carcinomas. At times, you can get non-squamous cell carcinoma oral cancers as well. The treatment for oral cancer also can give rise to some ulceration, especially the radiotherapy and the chemotherapy. The people coming after the radiotherapy, they may develop mucositis, either acute mucositis or chronic mucositis, and this can get due to the chemotherapy as well. The mucositis is considered as one of the most important side effects of radiotherapy, and this may be a reason for us to change our treatment protocol or even completely to abandon the radiotherapy, because it can be very troublesome for the patient as well, and they may not be able to eat at all. They may not be able to take anything oral, so therefore they will not be able to go ahead with the treatment. You can have chronic solitary ulceration due to some infections as well, and one such example is tuberculosis. Even though the tuberculosis in the oral tissue is not common, at times you can get oral tuberculosis as well. I have seen few cases where the patient are coming with the ulceration, and all these ulceration are having a very sharp edge with minimal induration. And the common site to get the tuberculosis is the tongue, posterior tongue. Some of these patients can have a pulmonary involvement, whereas there can be other people without the pulmonary involvement as well. This patient did not have the pulmonary involvement. Deep fungal infections are very common, not very common, but they are common time to time. We see them with the ulceration in the oral cavity, especially in the posterior part of the mouth. and in the tongue as well. So these patients, the type of organism can be vary, but the histoplasmosis is the commonest. It's important because the histoplasmosis gives rise to a lot of pain. Most people who are having histoplasmosis, they comes with a severe unbearable pain, and the lesion may spread into the maxillary antrum. And most of the lesions are starting from the maxillary antrum and coming into the oral cavity, or it can go in the other way as well. And there may be people who are having the lesions only in the maxillary antrum without having the oral ulcerations as well. And most of these lesions are invasive, especially if you get them in the immunocompromised patients. So therefore, it can spread and it can kill the patient. So these are a few examples for the deep fungal infections. This is histoplasmosis. You can see the two lesions. These two patients, they came 1 week apart. So the right side patient who is having the lesion in the tongue, that patient came first. And there was a little bit of a delay in the diagnosis. We did the biopsy twice and the diagnostic report was not confirmatory at the first one. And then only the second one we were able to diagnose. And that unfortunate gentleman passed away. Whereas the other patient who came 1 week after, we were able to cure the patient completely. So the second gentleman was having a diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes. We couldn't control the diabetes at all with all interventions. So that was the reason why the patient had the disseminated infection and passed away. Oral candidosis can give rise to ulceration at times. Not only the deep fungal infection, even the superficial fungal infection, oral candidosis can give rise to ulceration. In different places, it may be in the palate, like in the palatal hypoplasias and the palatal erosions, or it may be present in the tongue, like in median rhomboid glossitis. It may be associated with acute glossitis with antibiotics. So likewise, there are different fungal conditions which can give rise to the oral ulceration and erosion. And these conditions can be managed very well by removing the predisposing factor and with topical antifungals like nystatin. Then we will move into the multiple chronic ulcers. The multiple chronic ulcers are mostly associated with systemic disease. Oral lichen planus is one of the commonest. We see enough number of oral lichen planus in our day-to-day practice. So this is one of the commonest reason for one to get the oral ulceration. It's a chronic mucocutaneous disease. Most of the patients, they have the lesions in the skin and oral cavity, but some people, they have it in the oral cavity only, and even the people who are having it only in the oral cavity, later on, they can develop it in the skin as well. There are different clinical presentations. Some are only giving symptoms, whereas the majority of them, they are asymptomatic, and most of these asymptomatic lesions are white in appearance. And it is common to have a mixture of pattern. Erosive or the ulcerative type, it is difficult to differentiate from other the skin diseases like pemphigus or the pemphigoid. They have a similar clinical appearance. Whereas the white lesions, the plaque type and the reticular type, they are easy to diagnose, and even sometimes you don't need a biopsy for the confirmation. Clinical features are good enough. So these are some of the cases. So this is not ulcerative type, this is the reticular type, which is the commonest. Around 70 to 80% of the time, the patients are having this type. The lichen planus is commonly seen among the adults, especially in the middle age group, but you can get them in children as well. I have seen enough number of children with the lichen planus as well. So these are some conditions where we can see the erosions and the ulcerations, and it is not uncommon to have the involvement in the gingiva, giving rise to a desquamative gingivitis. And when the patient is having the desquamative gingivitis, it is difficult to manage compared to the rest of the lesion. Anyway, managing the oral lesions are difficult than the skin lesions. They are very chronic, and most of the time it is resistant to treatment as well. Some more photographs showing the lesions in different places. The appearance can be varied from one patient to the other. The common sites of involvement are the buccal mucosa, tongue, and the gingiva, but rarely you may see the lesions in the palate as well as in the lip. Patient may be having lesions elsewhere as well, and it is not uncommon to have the genital lesions, the skin lesions, especially in the flexor surface of the hands and legs, and also in the fingernails. Oral lichen planus is considered to be a potentially malignant disorder, and these rarely they can transform into the malignancy. In my clinic, I have more than 2,500 patients whom we are following up, and out of the 2,500 patients, 2,500 plus patients, we have seen 3 cases transform into the malignancy. One patient, the patient was having all the risk habits, so we were not sure whether it is the real transformation or not. But whereas the other 2 patients, they were not on any risk habits, so though we consider them as the direct transformation. Presence of epithelial dysplasia in the initial biopsy is a very important factor predicting the malignant transformation. Management is extremely difficult. Oral cases, not possible for us to cure it completely, and the condition will have the remission and relapses. So basically, our management will be the symptomatic, mostly with the steroids, and if the patient is not in a position to take steroid, other immunomodulatory immunosuppressive therapy will be helpful. Another condition which can mimic oral lichen planus clinically is plasma cell mucositis. Clinically, they almost looks the same. Only difference, the plasma cell mucositis involvement of the tongue is much more commoner than the rest of the area. And here this is important because there is a plasma cells and there is a possibility of transforming them into lymphoma. DLE, again, a lot of patients, about 90% of the patients with DLE, they are having the manifestation in the head and neck region. The lip is the common site. People believe the DLE to get aggravated with the use of smoking as well as with the sun exposure. Again, this is a potentially malignant disorder, and the patient may end up with transforming it into a malignancy. 3 words about the pemphigus vulgaris. Even though it is not very common, time to time we get patients with pemphigus vulgaris having the oral manifestations. Most of the patients with pemphigus, they start the disease in the oral cavity, and later on only they develop the skin disease. So the recognizing the pemphigus vulgaris with the oral laceration alone will be very advantage to the patient, because we can identify them at early stage and manage them at a very early stage with the minimum type of a management protocol than when the patient is having extensive lesions involved in the rest of the body. The first site to get the involvement is the palate. So the posterior palate, like in the upper photograph, you can see the patient will develop the vesicles, erosions and the ulceration, and it is extremely difficult to see the vesicles in the oral cavity. They rupture like nothing due to the trauma in the oral cavity. And later on, the patient will start developing the ulceration all over the mouth. Like this, you can see the vesicles and the ulceration. The patient will tell that they will develop a vesicle and they will rupture. And you can get the involvement in the gingiva as well. And in addition to that, the patient may be having lesions elsewhere, including the skin, the nose, genital areas, the eyes, every place. Pemphigus vulgaris is basically a disease of elderly, mostly in the 7th decade of life, but at times we can get the lesions in children as well. Now, this case that whom we have reported, this patient was 9 years old, and this patient has been taken treatment from multiple places, from multiple people, and all these patients has treated the child as having recurrent aphthous stomatitis. So finally, we did the biopsy and confirmed the diagnosis of pemphigus. So at times, we may see atypical presentation in atypical age groups as well. So we have to be little careful when we are dealing with these patients. Diagnosis has to be done with the immunofluorescence, and the management of the pemphigus has to be done in a specialized unit, and these patients need systemic corticosteroids. It is extremely difficult to manage with the topical steroids alone. Then we will move into the mucous membrane pemphigoid. The mucous membrane pemphigoid is relatively common compared to the pemphigus. And most of the patients with the mucous membrane pemphigoid, they will have the involvement of the oral cavity together with the genital and the skin, the eye involvement. Saying so, even though it says mucous membrane pemphigoid, around 20% of the patients can have the skin involvement as well. The mucous membrane pemphigoid is not as life-threatening as pemphigus, but the morbidity is much higher with the pemphigoid than the pemphigus, mucous membrane pemphigoid than the pemphigus, because the mucous membrane pemphigoid will give rise to scarring. So therefore, you can get the scarring in the oral cavity, the genital areas, eyes, nose, and those will have an effect on the function. Especially when you have the involvement of the eye, that can cause the blindness later on. The commonest place to get the mucous membrane pemphigoid is the gingiva. Around 80% of the people with mucous membrane pemphigoid, they have the gingival involvement, and most of the people will have only the gingival involvement. Later on, only they will develop the involvement in the rest of the area. So you can see here the lesions, and in these two photographs, you can see the intact blisters as well. Actinomycosis is another infection which is chronic and can give rise to multiple ulcerations. So this is due to the actinomycosis, the species, and the patient will have the lesions mostly in the mandible. And the characteristic feature here, the patient will have multiple discharging sinuses like this. The lower border of the mandible, that is the commonest place, and it is extremely difficult to eradicate completely. With the shorter course of antibiotics, these patients need long-term penicillin therapy as well as surgical debridement to take out the infective foci. Leishmaniasis is not something common in this part of the country, but nowadays numbers are going up and up in the northwestern province, north central province, Anuradhapura Polonnaru area, and Matale to some extent. And we get patients, especially from Matale, time to time having lip erosions like that, and these people are having the leishmaniasis. We'll move to the recurrent ulceration. The most common reason for one to have a recurrent ulceration is the aphthous stomatitis. There's a lot of people, I'm sure some of you are here, must have experienced the recurrent ulceration. It is not something uncommon, but at the same time, it's something without a very good treatment, and it is something that can have an effect on the quality of life as well. There are three types: minor, major, and the herpetiform, and one patient can have different types in the different time periods of the life. Major aphthous ulceration takes longer period to heal, and sometimes it takes weeks to heal, and it may need systemic corticosteroids for the management. Major aphthous ulcerations can mimic malignancy as well. So here you can see some of the ulcerations, and sometimes, especially with the herpetiform ulceration, the patient can have 100+ ulceration at any given time. Whereas the minor aphthous ulceration, usually the ulceration will be from 3 to 10. Major aphthous ulceration is usually 1. Again, all these can happen at any age, and even you can get the aphthous ulceration in small babies as well. So this is a neonate with the major aphthous ulceration in the palate. Now the problem here, this will have a serious effect on the baby's feeding. So we have to be very careful in identification this. We can get the oral ulceration, recurrent oral ulceration associated with gastrointestinal diseases as well. Crohn's disease, its oral manifestation, the orofacial granulomatosis is one of those. So we will get multiple oral ulceration. Together with the multiple oral ulceration, characteristically these patients will have facial or the labial swelling. There can be mucosal tags, cobblestone appearance, and the angular cheilitis as well, in addition to the features of Crohn's. So these are some features who are having the disease. The lip involvement, the characteristic lip involvement is the most important feature. The other important differential diagnosis here is the angioedema. But if the patient is having intraoral presentation like ulceration, the mucosal tags, then it will be easy for us to identify the orofacial granulomatosis or the oral manifestations of Crohn's. Even though this is not happening inside the oral cavity, I thought I will include this slide as well, because this is a dental infection. I have seen few times where the people has taken, this patient is coming with the discharging sinus, and I have seen many times the people try to do the surgery from the outside without realizing that this is the dental infection causing it. So when you look at the mouth, we can see some of the teeth are not in the proper color. There's a discoloration, non-vital teeth, and there's an infection going on, and this infection is going through the tract and coming into the face. Really, the leukemias, now I will move into the last few slides, the rare conditions. So what I have mentioned previously are the common conditions. I will just mention few of those. So this is one child with the leukemia who presented with the gingival enlargement and the oral ulceration. That was the main complaint, and this patient has been seen by few dental surgeons thinking that this is the periodontal disease and they have done the treatment. But when you look at this and when you take the history, we are sure that this is not a simple periodontal disease, and therefore we did the simple full blood count to see the white cell count is 101. So likewise, even simple investigation will be helpful to differentiate these. So these are some others. Now the lower photograph, again the similar story. So this patient is having Wegener's granulomatosis, and again this patient has taken treatment from multiple people, going from one place to the other without realizing this is something serious. So again it has gone as the gingival involvement, the periodontitis, and the patient was given antibiotics, this and that, without much of a involvement. So the other patient was having again the gingival ulceration and enlargement, and that is drug induced. The upper patient is having the sarcoidosis, whereas the other patient was having erysipelas. So likewise, we may see some conditions which are not conditions that we are seeing in our day-to-day life. Right. So my last slide. Most of the oral ulceration, they are due to the common reasons, and these can be managed by the general practitioners without much of an issue. But there are situations where we have to take the specialist advice. And these are the reasons when we have to, the general practitioners, when they have to refer the patient to a specialist. Whenever the diagnosis is not clear. Sometimes initial appearance, you may think this is something simple, but if it is not responding to traditional treatment, you may have to see otherwise. Whenever the diagnosis is not clear, you have to refer it to a specialist. And when we are suspecting a possible serious diagnosis like a malignancy, then the presence of a systemic disease, and when we are not sure about the investigation, whether to do a biopsy or not, whether to do this type of investigation or the other type of investigation, and when we have to go for the complex investigations, there's no point wasting our time doing the complex investigations and struggling to interpret the findings. And when we are not sure about the treatment, and when the treatment is complex, especially when the patient needs long-term immunosuppressive therapy, and treatment where the agents, the drugs that we are using are not freely available, and when we are not sure about the prognosis of the disease, we have to refer the patient, as well as when the patient requests so. So these are the main reasons for us to refer the patient to a specialist. Thank you. And if you have any question, I'm more than happy to answer any question that you are having.
Well, I have
Yes, please.
Now, this is number one cancer in Sri Lanka, but I think we don't give that. We don't. There's not much of emphasis on oral cancer. Is it because it is seen only in a special group of patients, like lower socioeconomy, or is there any difference there, or is it just seen among everybody?
Thank you, Arinder. It is the number one cancer among Sri Lankan males, and the numbers are going up and up every day. I fully agree with you. The emphasis given on this is not good enough. The awareness among the patients, and talking about the patients, even among the healthcare professionals, is not good enough. Being a preventable cancer, easily diagnosable cancer, identifiable cancer, the emphasis that we are having is not good enough. One reason for that is like you said, the oral cancer is mostly a disease of poor. We commonly see it in the poor socio-economic strata, and that is one reason why the people are not taking it seriously, because they have other reasons, other things to worry. So we have to take this seriously and do something to give the message to the people. So there are many things that we can do. Number one, the areca nut, it's a carcinogen. it's something responsible for oral cancer, but majority of the people, including many healthcare professionals, they don't know the danger of alkaline. Number two, the tobacco, especially the smokeless tobacco, we have not taken it seriously. We have taken it as a norm. Smoking, yes, we are very serious. We have the regulations governing it, and we are serious in implementing the regulations. That is why the smoking, the percentages are going down. We see a drastic reduction due to the price and education, all that. But it is not the same for smokeless tobacco. We have the regulations, but no one is implementing the regulations. The regulation for smokeless tobacco is much strict than the smoking, but still no implementation whatsoever, because everybody thinks this is something that is there in our culture. So if we try to do, we are going against the culture, and there will be a lot of political pressure and all that. We are not doing anything on that. Thirdly, we are not doing the education properly on this regard, and we have to take some responsibility of that. Now, for example, if you talk about the self-breast examination, many women, they know about it. But self-mouth examination, if you ask, forget about the normal people, even if you ask among the doctors, many of us are not aware about the self-mouth examination, and many people, they don't know how to do it. But it is not the same for the breast. So likewise, there is a problem in our approach which has to be corrected.
Yeah, personal question. When you get this access also, like, everybody would have experience. You can't eat, you can't talk, and especially when I'm lecturing, if you're especially under the tongue, you can't do anything. So is there a way of treating that, if you're getting, because I have seen that when I'm stressed out, I get. But is there a kind of except the Bonjela, I don't know any other.
Now the Bonjela is not available. No, after ulceration, I didn't went to the details of it. That is something where we see the literature says around 20% of the population gets it, but we don't have a treatment for that, simply because the different people are getting it due to different reasons. There are 1001 conditions which can cause septal ulceration. What the reason what you are getting it, not the reason that I am getting it. So that is why coming up with the treatment is very difficult. Whatever we do is basically will solve the problem you are having right now. It will not prevent you getting from getting it again. So the recurrence, we cannot prevent it. Only time where we can prevent the recurrence is when you are having it due to some type of allergy, or when you are having a nutritional deficiency. A lot of people get it due to the nutritional deficiency. So each and every patient who is having aphthous ulceration must have to have a full blood count. So if you don't have any nutritional deficiency, then it is difficult to treat. So we have a treatment protocol. If you are getting ulcers with the ulcer-free period of more than 6 weeks, so you are getting ulcer today, it heals, and then you are going to get another after months. So those patients that can be managed with the covering agents. You don't need any type of immunosuppressive therapy. And if your ulcer-free period is less than 6 weeks, but above 3 weeks, and those patients can be managed with the topical steroids. And if your ulcer-free period is less than 3 weeks, but more than a week, between that period, we need a topical steroid, but a potent topical steroid. And if your ulcer-free period is less than a week, so that means you are getting it all the time, those patients need systemic steroids or any other type of immunosuppressive therapy. The best so far in the literature is the thalidomide. So thalidomide will prevent the recurrence as well to a greater extent. But unfortunately, we don't use it here because of the other reasons. But according to the literature, that is the best drug. What we do, we usually goes with the steroid, but only for a shorter period of time.
Right. So, thank you very much, Ruan, for that extensive lecture on oral ulcerations. And I suppose, yeah, we need some, because oral cavities, obviously, it's an easy thing to see, and then at least we don't have a screening method. Because I have seen for everything there are screening, like even congenital dysplasia of the hip are screened. So at least there are some sort of a screening program to be incorporated into MOH areas where like they see. I don't think even in MOH areas they will specifically look for oral ulceration. They just check the blood pressure, they check the sugar, but not the oral cavity, I suppose. So it's a good eye opener. Anyway, thank you very much, Professor Ruwan Jayasinghe, for that elaborative lecture. So I would like to call upon the senior OMF surgeon in Kandy, Dr. Nandana Kularatne, to come and give away the certificate of appreciation. Restorative, yes. Okay. So please, there are some refreshments is ready for you all. And tomorrow there's a workshop on stroke management. There are about 6 or 7 vacancies still open. Please, this is important for MOs and people who are working A&E and all that. It's very good. And you are being awarded with 1,000 rupee gift voucher also if you come, and the meals are also, everything will be provided. So I strongly suggest that, especially people who are involved with acute emergency medicine care, please attend this conference workshop. Please. Thanks.